Excuse me. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the school committee meeting for September 20th, 2023. Good to see you all. I will call the meeting to order, and we can rise to pledge the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so as we move to approve the agenda for this evening, I know that we have one change. We will be removing the fourth quarter report under the finance subcommittee report. For tonight, are there any other changes? All right. Then we can move right on to citizen speak. And let's see, does it look like we have any attendees? Okay, so yes, I see one person raise their hand online. If you are joining us remotely and would like to participate in Citizen Speak, just raise your hand. You will be promoted. Is anybody here in the room hoping to participate in Citizen Speak? So just a quick reminder that we welcome citizens to come and participate, or residents of Milton rather, and share your perspectives with us for up to 3 minutes. So Dr. Pavlicek, are you able to elevate the individual online?
Yes. Take just a second. Here we go.
Okay. So thank you for joining. Just please go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll make sure we can hear you.
Sure. Hello, my name is Ethan Case. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Yeah. Hold on a second, Ethan. Can we get the volume adjusted to be able to?
He needs to turn this up.
Okay.
Is that better?
A little bit. It's a little bit faint.
Maybe we have a speaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's ours.
Trying to turn up the volume. Just a moment, please.
Okay.
Want to try again?
Yeah, hello, good evening.
Perfect.
Yes, thank you.
Is that
That's
better?
That's great. Yes.
All right, excellent. Thank you. My name is Ethan Case, and I have students at Milton High School, Pierce Middle School, and College Elementary who have gone through all starting in kindergarten. Just apologies in advance for not attending in person. I had coached soccer, so just got out of practice, so wanted to make sure I could express my views here. I want to address the busing situation in Milton. My family and I are extremely disappointed at the fact that Milton cannot provide and actively denies bus passes to all students. It's really an essential service. By not providing busing, it forces more vehicles onto the road. It forces 16-year-olds who are not ready to do a daily commute onto the roads. It creates environmental and safety issues. And it really puts a tremendous strain and stress on the families of Milton to get their children to school. A community such as ours should not ever have to worry about getting their kids to school. No other similar communities have this issue. This issue is extremely predictable. You know how many students are coming. You know what your usual bus ridership is. You choose not to provide the service. And it's extremely disappointing and frankly inexcusable. It's a failure of the administration, the school committee, and the transportation department. No one in Milton should ever have to worry about getting their kids to school. You know, there's a lot of effort these days to to help working families and help with DEI issues, those are exactly the families that you're harming the most by not providing bus service to all your students. This problem is only going to get worse as the classes starting in 6th and 7th grade are large and will only get larger going smaller. I see it in the soccer community. Our programs are busting at the seams. There's so many kids in the system. We need to find a way to address this. We need to add another bus, even if it's only for the middle school and high school. It is unfair to these students and unfair to these families, and it needs to be a top priority.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Case, for joining us tonight and sharing that perspective. Really appreciate your taking the time to come, and we've heard your points, and thank you.
This will be a future agenda item.
Can this, yeah, yes, well, so we don't respond to individual citizen speakers per our policy, but yeah, definitely the transportation sort of status, how it's been going this beginning of school year will continue to be on our updates. And also, of course, it's something that we can talk about more heading into the next year as far as our budget process with the implications that have been raised. So, but yeah, we're definitely aware of the issue. So glad that Mr. Case took the time to join us. And that's a perfect example of why we're meeting in this hybrid setting, so that someone can coach soccer and then jump on Citizen Speak to be able to let us know what's going on for them. So just before we close out Citizen Speak, making sure, is anyone else here to participate in Citizen Speak this evening? All right, so then with that, we can go to our next agenda item, and I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Burrows. Thanks, Superintendent's report.
Awesome. Good evening. So first thing wanted to talk about, which is in the news and everyone's anxiously awaiting, is our MCAS results. And we spent the last couple days digging into those. We spent Friday on a call with DESE and learned a little bit more about the state context for where assessment is. Learned some really helpful information. We'll be sharing some of that tonight as we talk about both the kind of state takeaways and what we see in terms of Milton at a kind of high level. Our plan for tonight is to share kind of what we could quickly put together today. Just wanted to give the school committee and community at large just a quick kind of snapshot on our initial takeaways. We'll be bringing this back in 2 weeks for our first curricular presentation, where we really start to dig into the data, look at subgroups, and talk more kind of specifically around what we think it means. We were talking earlier before the start of the meeting that sometimes looking at a single grade, for example, you might see movement in one direction or another that's hard to pinpoint exactly why that one group moved in whatever direction. So we'll be working over the next couple of weeks to dig as much as we can, talk with our directors as well who are leading this work in all the different subject areas to get a better sense of what kind of connections we can make between these results and the work that we're doing and the things that are happening in the classroom. That is the goal as we get towards this first curricular presentation and we look at how to bring everybody, and especially the school committee, into an understanding of, and frankly for the system itself to know why we're doing what we're doing and how it's impacting the data that we're looking at. We want to really be sure that we're not sharing lots and lots of data with our community and there's not an understanding of what we're doing to impact those data. And for the people that are doing that work, our teachers, our administrators, our support staff, everybody, that they also understand that the reason we're doing these things this year and committing to these three priorities is because we know by doing those things, these outcomes will change for our students. So that I'm excited for the start of this, and I think tonight is going to be a good kind of beginning of moving all of us in that direction. I'm going to introduce. Garth is going to start us off on a slideshow, and then V is going to while we're on this topic, let's kind of dig into this. V is going to add some substance in terms of the work she did to compile this, but Garth is going to, I believe, lead off here.
Okay.
Can we go back 2 slides? All right, well, we'll start.
All right, so I'll just start us off. I think a lot of this information is already covered by Superintendent Burrows here, but the DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, just released the MCAS results to the public yesterday afternoon at noon, and after that, we scurried to put together some initial slides so that I know that we're all anticipating this data, especially because this is officially the second year post-pandemic. Is what DESE considered to be our return to normal school year, and this is the first year after that. So everyone is anticipating this data. So as I said, they released it yesterday at noon, and they did share with us that they'll be sending home individual student reports to the district on September 29, after which we will be mailing that home to all families. So one thing that to keep in mind is just to remember that MCAS testing has been very variable over the last 5 years, and you kind of see it here. 2019 was the last year before the pandemic hit that we really had full MCAS results. And 2020, no testing. 2021, kind of a hybrid situation. And 22, as I mentioned, was the first back to normal school year last year. So this year is really the change that we're looking at, which direction and all that. So we're excited to share some of our results with you tonight. Next slide, please. Okay, so the big news from the state yesterday, looking at the state results, is that ELA and math results are showing a halt in the pandemic slide, meaning that it stopped going further downward. So even though there are still big gaps for the state and for our district too, to kind of overcome, to get back to where we were pre-pandemic, it's a good sign that at least the learning loss that has been happening everywhere nationally, statewide, locally, is kind of is stopping in its track, and we're seeing the reverse happening. So in Milton, our initial results are showing that we are making progress toward closing the unfinished learning gaps, and particularly for our youngest learner, which is really exciting. I know that we all, parents in the community have really been worried about that. Like our youngest learner who have had 3 years of interrupted education, like how are they doing? So the results for our third grader this year is a really hopeful sign. We see in ELA, our third grader actually achieved the highest percentage gains back of any of our grade levels. So they made 13 percentage point gains over last year, which is amazing. And so why we did that, the state number is kind of staying flat. And other grades also made performance gains, while grades 4 and 10 stay relatively level. Okay. And in math, I'm happy to share that our third graders also achieved the biggest gain over the last year with 9 percentage point gain. And with the exception of a small dip in grade 7 math and level performance in grade 4, the other grades are also seeing gains. Science, we are seeing a 5 percentage point gains in grade 8 and level performance in the other 2 grade level. So as Superintendent Burrows said, we will continue to dig into this data more, be looking at it at the school level, the subgroups, and changes as compared to 2019. I know that 2 changes over 2022 is looking very hopeful for us, but we want to track our progress as compared to 2019 as well. So we will be looking at those data in the coming weeks.
Didn't we implement the new math curriculum for the first time last school year? At the elementary level? Yeah.
The elementary math curriculum, yes.
This next slide speaks to how we're going to use these results. So, first of all, MCAS are a useful measure to make sure kids are on track for meeting the rigor of the next grade level. But it's not the only measure. We use a number of different other measures, common assessments, student attendance, projects, report cards to evaluate where kids are. And then this next part evaluates, kind of outlines the areas that we're going to work on over the next 2 weeks before we come back for kind of a quarterly curriculum update. So meeting monthly with the curriculum leads. They'll be working on a data analysis, looking at items where kids perform well, overall student performance, speaking across the grade levels, like at the middle school, passing that information up from 6th grade to 7th grade. Comparative analysis, looking at trends over year to year in different groups, and of course looking at all our subgroup performance. We're working on a curriculum kind of procedure to make sure teachers are working on their scope and sequence, pacing, fidelity. Do we need additional resources? Is the content up to date? Looking at our instructional practices and the interventions. We have a lot of great interventions now at the elementary level. We have some new assessments this year. We'll be speaking about that next week in terms of using MClass and iReady assessments and how those are aligning or not aligning with the MCAS results. And then also we always reach out for professional development for our teachers when needed and our teacher leaders.
All right, so this slide is laying out the ELA results for our district this year. And the kind of orange bar is the results from 2022. And the red bar is our result from this year, from spring of 2023. And the red bar is where the state is. Okay, so if you look across the board, we are obviously doing much better than the state in every level, every grade. But what's exciting is the change in performance that you see from 22 to 23. Almost every grade level here, you see improved performance. So that's a really hopeful sign for our district and the work that we have ahead of us to make sure that we keep compounding on these gains.
And school committee members, this is in your folder, if you also want to look at it. Yeah.
So if we go to the next slide, so this is looking at the math performance for our district. And similarly, we see gains in a lot of the grade levels. There are some anomaly, which we will want to look at closer, but overall, a hopeful picture for math performance. And then last but not least, our science results. And here we see kind of level of performance increases at some places, but overall, we're on a good trajectory.
So this last slide, we wanted to share these results with you. You also have in your folders the communication that will go out to the school and the community that speaks to these results. And as I shared, we'll be looking more closely and analyzing how we're doing in comparison to the state, our subgroup performance, comparison back to 2019. We do have an early release coming this Friday, so a lot of grade levels and departments are using that time to look at item analysis and some of the trend data. Where parents will be sending home the individual student reports by the end of the month, and then looking forward to tying this information together with our curriculum work. Danielle Wetmore, Student Services, and Zakia Jared and I are working on that quarterly update and try to tie the work all together in one presentation for you coming up.
Great. Well, thanks so much for the updates and for working so hard to get us something so quickly. Even though it will be good to dig in, as you said, dig in further in 2 weeks. There's a lot here. So, questions, comments, anybody?
I appreciate the fact that you were able to pull it together, and it's nice to see that the changes in curriculum we've made to math are now bearing fruit. And I remember last year we had questions about the alignment of the ELA curriculum relative to the MCAS, and we're seeing a turnaround. So it may not, it's when you do that item analysis, you might see that, in fact, that may not have been the issue. So this is all great news, and it's something to celebrate because a lot of effort went back into making sure students made gains. And we've had teachers that stuck with us. And it wasn't easy, but very much appreciated all the hard work that went behind those numbers. So thank you all, and thanks for presenting it so quickly.
Other questions, or should I move on to?
Anyone else?
Good job.
Yeah. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
So continuing my report, I skipped down to B just because we were already talking about it. First Listening and Learning Forum, a few folks here were there on Monday at Pierce, and it was great to kind of listen and learn from people, and we had a number of different activities that participants did. They were working in small groups, kind of thinking about both how they feel right now about Milton and our schools, looking ahead to the kinds of things that need to be focused on, talking about schooling and what our kind of conceptions are around what schooling should look like. It was, I think, informative. It was, I think, helpful for people in the audience, too, to talk with others, sometimes with different perspectives, which I think is really important. 5 more of those coming up. Mark was there as a SC rep. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to more of those, along with all the other things that I'm doing over the next 2 months to continue this part of my kind of journey in the first year here. The one other thing I've been working on, and it's one of the attachments in the packet, is my goals. And just talking about the listening and learning portion of my entry plan, you can see that illustrated really in my goals in terms of thinking through some of this language from the goals comes from my entry plan. The professional practice goal doesn't, but the other ones do. Just in thinking about the 3 district improvement goals here that I've outlined, one is the school governance goal, where, making sure that I'm putting in as much energy as I can to support all of you and support us as a strong team in leading Milton Public Schools. District Improvement Goal 2, which is both the work I'm doing in the first half of the year in the listening and learning portion, and looking really kind of at the needs, the current needs. So some of what I'm doing this year is future planning. Some of what I'm doing is fixing problems right now. So this is fixing problems right now. Things that don't need a lot of planning and time, but just need, if it's an obvious fix it. And district improvement goal number 3, which is the writing up my priority report after this initial few months and building that implementation plan to start to lay out what are the steps we're taking as a school district to meet the objectives and the pillars of the strategic plan. So those are the 3 District improvement goals, kind of going back up the page here. The professional practice goal, as I thought about what's important for me in my first year here, it's really getting connected to the metro area, to community, to agencies, to other superintendents, to all of the things that are going to help me be successful here and also bring connections here. So that is something I'm actively involved in right now, excited about. I presented today, I was a panelist for MPDE, which is the Massachusetts Partnership for Diversity in Education. And I presented on some of the work that we're doing here around equity. So I'm taking opportunities when I can to connect with people and hopefully bring resource back into Milton. And then finally, the student learning goal, which is understanding the current kind of strengths of, this is primarily around special ed, but really includes general ed too. Making sure that we have systems in place so that every student is performing at their highest level. Looking at tiered intervention, working with Danielle and helping to, as she's in her first year too, and you all may have read her entry plan, which she shared, the work that she's doing. A lot of that is coming off of the report that was published in, I think it was June. Did we get that in June? June, yeah. So that was a really helpful document for her to, an outside agency came in and assessed all of our special education systems. She's using that as a platform to start to work and think about what needs to happen. And we're tying that together with general ed so that she's not off on an island doing special ed over here and general ed over here. So we're really doing this together, which I think is powerful and necessary. So those are my goals, and I believe it needs a vote.
Do we have an opportunity to?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
There's a couple things that I wanted to raise. So thank you for putting together very thoughtful goals that reflect what you've learned so far and the things that I think for the most part we know to be true about the district. In the district improvement goal number 1, there's a comment at the end that actually done also relates to professional practice goal. It's establish clear communication protocols and determine the structure of the evaluation process for the superintendent. And if anything, I just want to make sure that we're doing it with you. And I think the language, your intent is to say that it's a group, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page, that's clear. And then for the professional practice goals, this reminded me of the conversation we had at the last meeting about what is the evidence that will be used. Because one of the challenges that we had in prior opportunities to reflect on the instrument was we had not previously determined what would be used as evidence to show success. And the way this is written, it's appropriate for that text box, but I think as a committee, we just have to be in unison with you. So we're not saying, well, we expected success to look like this. And you might say, no, actually, this is what I really meant. So I think it's worthwhile, even if it's at our next retreat, to delve into that in more detail.
And I think the onus is on me in some ways to provide evidence that to disparate perspectives, it still speaks to that area. So, do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. It's similar to when you'd asked us when we write your evaluation, if there is some opportunity to summarize, so that if, let's say, Mark says this is a 5 and someone else says this is a 1, that you're not trying to accommodate those extremes. And this is an example of, let's make sure that we're all in agreement as to what the evidence will be, so that at the end you're not saying, I didn't know this is what you meant. That's not something we want to happen to anyone, much less the new superintendent. And then my last comment, which is not something that's on here, but for those of you who participated in the finance committee, the school committee finance subcommittee and the select board committee, we learned that the town administrator is creating a 5-year plan, and quickly. And one of my concerns that I expressed was that you're new to this town. 1 year, I think you could do in your sleep. 5 years will require a significant amount of your time in planning. And I just want to make sure that it's somehow reflected here.
Which part? A 5-year plan or?
The fact that there's an expectation that you are contributing to what the 5-year plan will be, so that the town does not underfund the district 3-4 years out, because, and it's not going to be perfect. I've publicly shared my reticence given the timing, because I think anyone reasonably could come up with a 3-year plan in 6 months, but I don't even think we have 6 months and it's a 5-year. So I just want to make sure that it's, even if it's listed here as something that we're doing together, that, because right now in the books, technically we're only on the record for having a next fiscal year plan. So it's much larger, and given the moving parts around enrollment and facilities, it's just, it's a challenge. But I want to make sure that we're all aware that it's something that we're expected to deliver on to our constituents. That's all.
Thanks for raising that piece.
I guess one question to your point, Bev, where would you put it embedded in one of the district improvement goals? Or how do we go ahead and differentiate, right, between sort of what we would hold ourselves accountable as a finance committee, obviously under, partnership with Dr. Burrows. But just want to sort of think about teasing that out a little bit more in terms of to what degree, we hold ourselves, right? And again, it's in partnership with Dr. Burrows.
So I want to say that when we created our goals as a school committee, it predated the conversation with Nick.
Yeah, that's what I was
So
thinking
it's a
about that.
timing issue.
Yeah.
I think we should revisit our goals because it's equally our responsibility. Dr. Burrows is very new. Glenn has been here for a long time. Amy Dexter's been here for a long time. But given our growth estimates, and we've had this conversation about, the immediate need for facilities, there's probably 5 or 10 things that are on top of my mind for things that we plan for. And it's our responsibility to add it to our goals. But as we talked about during the finance committee, this is an effort that we're doing with Dr. Burrows and Dr. Pavlicek. So it's not a I gotcha moment, it's more of a let's make sure we don't drop the ball moment.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So to say which category, I didn't think that far, but I know it needs to be in here. Maybe it's part of the strategic plan where he talks about, this is in district improvement goal number 3, build implementation plan based on findings from the entry plan priority report to direct MPS initiatives, strategic investments, including contributing to the 5-year plan in line with MPS strategic plan.
Right.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
And I agree that we can come back around to our goals. We can't discuss that now because it,
Yeah, it's
it
not on the
wasn't on our
agenda.
agenda, but we can bring that back and try to figure out where it should be articulated like directly within that.
But otherwise, I think your goals are great, Siobhan.
Yeah, for me, a high-level comment is that I like how sort of your goals are falling in line with the entry plan that you put forward, and also the various conversations that we've been having, not only about sort of the priorities, your priorities, but also like our priorities as a school committee and sort of the district, and all the changes that we are taking on. So it reflects very nicely. So it seems like it's the right goals and a good way to assess sort of how your year goes. So thank you for putting them together.
It's very symbiotic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'll just say, you know, as we embark on this process, it might be a small thing, but I'm really appreciating the way that you've sort of taken the DESI rubric already and made that our tool. That's
Save time.
very refreshing because I frankly didn't expect that, but am realizing right here that you've saved us time, but you've also given us a way to imagine these goals as the beginning of the process through which we'll use DESI's tool. Mm-hmm. And you're laying it out, including marking focus indicators. And I just don't take for granted that you had the foresight, but also took the time to do that. So thank you.
So what's our next step?
So,
motion?
yeah.
We amend it and make a
should we-
motion?
We need to, so it sounds like you made a concrete suggestion of naming the 5-year plan under District Improvement Goal 3, where it also mentions the MTS strategic plan. And so, Peter, would you be open to that as like a?
Yeah, the town, is it the town of Milton 5-year fiscal plan?
And when in doubt, feel free to put with the school committee so it doesn't feel as though it's not written as though you're solely responsible. Same thing with the evidence under professionals. Well, you can decide whether or not you want to edit that, but I do think we just have to be cognizant of that.
Well, and that will be, what you're raising there is going to be something that the evaluation subcommittee will really need to dig into. And when we get to the conversation about that, approving our subcommittee assignments, we could also look at editing the language there to reflect what you raised. Okay, so with the conversation we've just had and the change
I made the change.
that you made, thank you. I'll make a motion to approve the 2023-2024 superintendent's goals. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. All in favor? Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
There we go.
All right. So that segues nicely into this next piece that I just mentioned under the chair's report, which is coming back around to something we've discussed, but we now have the opportunity to try and sort of vote to approve it so that we then move forward. This is our subcommittee advisory committees. We have the opportunity to discuss because I created a new document. The former document, which listed out all the committees with the full descriptions and so on, had started to become a little bit unwieldy just by its length. And so I just wanted to cleanly sort of lay out for us what our subcommittees and advisory committees are and what our assignments are, and we can discuss that and move forward. You see the other document is linked at the top. Really, under subcommittees, obviously our finance and policy subcommittees have just been in operation after we had agreed at the beginning of the summer that these were our members for these committees. We last meeting approved the concept of the superintendent evaluation subcommittee. This is a chance, because that's a new idea, to kind of respond to some description on paper here, in case, just making sure that we're all like in agreement about the work, basically the responsibilities for this piece. Maybe give everyone a minute to, do we need to look through that?
I looked through it, and I noticed that the operating protocols advisory committee isn't on here, unless I missed it.
So that's a good,
It's on here at the bottom, right below joint town school committees. It says operating protocol, and then it says task force.
we have to talk about that.
Oh, I think I wrote that.
Yeah,
I just realized, I'm like, I typed that in there.
so on the next, I mean, we can definitely talk about it now. That's the next agenda item, so we're gonna have like a whole conversation about the approach to that piece. I think we should decide whether we want to form like what we're calling it, basically. At a minimum, was hoping to come out of tonight with like maybe 2 volunteers who are willing to work on that with Peter. And between now, a little over a month from now, when we come back together in a retreat setting to continue that operating protocols conversation. So we can definitely call it, I think a task force could be an appropriate name for that, time bound. We can, yeah, talk about that for sure. Does anyone have any, just on the evaluation subcommittee piece, these bullets, I was trying to use, again, the DESE guidance to delineate, based on what we talked about last time, you know, what will this subcommittee be responsible for, which is on the left, and then what will the full school committee be responsible for?
The only small thing I think under full school committee is just adding a fourth bullet that says vote on the final performance rating recommendation.
Good point, okay.
But I think this aligns personally to what we discussed last week, and it can make sense as a way to push the work forward within a smaller group while also having all of us involved in the important work of providing the superintendent feedback.
Any other input? Okay. One last thing we do need to do under this subcommittee is just determine who's going to be chairing this subcommittee of the 3 of us. I think there's a precedent for the school committee chair to chair the evaluation subcommittee. I'm happy to do that unless one of the 2 of you really strongly wants to take on another chair role, since you each already have some.
I was about to say not it, so I appreciate you jumping in.
I was going to volunteer, Mark. Selena already does that. It's too late.
All right. All right.
Thank you. Yeah,
Sure.
love your leadership.
So those are our subcommittees. All right, moving on to our advisory committees. Really just italicized here are the notes, you know, following from the conversations that we began in the retreat and sort of continued a little bit since then. But anyone have questions or discussion of any of these recommendations, or just sort of clarifications?
Just one comment, on like overall, I think it would be actually helpful, as we've somewhat discussed, like the purpose of all these and making sure we're aligned on like how these committees are moving the work forward, of the overall school committee, is potentially if we craft some type of small description of, again, kind of what the school committee believes is as a group, like the goal and the purpose, and the, I guess, charge of these advisory committees to be, that we then are expecting kind of reports to come back in about from the school committee representatives on these things. Just again, make that a little bit more clear as people take on that work, move that forward.
That sounds good. That sounds like something we can continue under the governance discussion because it pertains to sort of the layers of the work that we're all doing. And we can, of course, refer back to the original, full descriptions of the committees. Some of them are not really shifting very much from, whereas others are. As far as, the implications of these changes, I think we'll just need to follow up with members of the committees that are sort of shifting a little bit so that we're making sure that everybody is aware for what the work is going to look like this year.
So if, just from my own understanding, the Health and Wellness Advisory Committee, if this is no longer chaired by the school committee, would we then no longer consider this necessarily an advisory committee, and this would become more,
Like an internal.
SC representative to an outside board?
Yeah,
and
the
tax
internal
board?
district committee,
Okay.
which some of our committees have community members, some don't, depending on what the topic is, so.
It's the same with strategic planning, like ultimately, as we mentioned, it's an implementation at this point, and if Dr. Burrows and his
Right.
leadership team
Right.
it makes more sense for you to lead this.
Yeah, I just, the strategic planning one, in my mind, when I'm reading this, is we're doing away with that because there's, no point, versus the, no current kind of goal, I should say, versus the health and wellness, something that's continuing on. And I think from how I read this too, is that there would still be a school committee member participation.
Yeah.
So then is this just something that we kind of ongoing, similar to some of the other boards and task force representation, that we'd still like vote who's going to be our representative kind of on this committee, and so we kind of move it to that section of this, along with the climate action planning, security and safety committee, things like that. Is that a fair way?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, the other one that for me remains a little bit vague as to, I guess, the charge, to your point, Mark. I think that would be important to specify. Is the Curriculum and Instruction Advisory Committee. I do know our conversations, and we do feel like it's an important body to still remain. But the charge, I think, as we think about it, should become a bit more clear. Just in terms of, I think when there isn't, right now we have continuity of membership, right, with Member Denny continuing to chair that and be part of it, but what happens when new folks come on board that don't know? I think the more clear we can get as to what is the purpose of the advisory committee, I think that would be helpful. And I guess it really, frankly, it applies to all of them.
I think, I actually had a similar question earlier on, but I think the difference is this document is a summary from the notes from the retreat. If you select on the link, the hyperlink on top, it has the description of the original charge
Yeah, sorry
of
about
curriculum
that
instruction.
confusion.
And it talks about, who's going to participate, what the topics would be. It's just linked.
Right.
Yeah, so I think then partly the extent to which any of these committees' purpose is going to evolve beyond the technical changes that we've brought ourselves to, as far as recognizing that the strategic planning committee, has really run its course, and now that we have the strategic plan in place, it's about monitoring the implementation and progress towards the plan. So that's that. The Health and Wellness Committee, we're making a concrete change in terms of the role of school committee participation in that committee. So I think to the extent that other committees like curriculum and instruction, like facilities, you know, that you're kind of tweaking your purpose or your position, you know, within, I think that's, you know, depending on like the scale of the change that you're thinking about, it could be something you're discussing within your subcommittee, or your advisory committee, and sort of informing the rest of the school committee about how, if it's something, you know, that rises to the level of shaping your interactions with central office, for example, or any, like, then maybe that again comes under that governance kind of conversation. But we have to figure this out as we go, because, you know, we've not, we haven't really like strived for this level of coherence before.
And
so,
yeah, and just to add to what you were saying, and to Selena, your point, Dr. Burrows would love to transition this conversation to be something that happens during this meeting. And I do think, as your tenure continues in this district, you should be at a point where it doesn't have to be in a subcommittee. So that would, what I could foresee, that next year the school committee could say, you know what, Dr. Burrows, are we on the same page? Is this something that needs to be at this level anymore?
I think one thing I was just going to add, which there's like a real analogy to the work I'm doing within the district right now too, is connecting, you know, like our quarterly curriculum reports, for example, to then what's happening in the curriculum subcommittee, and having there be like a sense of how all these different pieces fit together. And I think in my review previously of the advisory committee and subcommittee work here has been sometimes some of that stuff hasn't come back here in ways that would be really meaningful and impactful. So when I look at what we're doing, can you just repeat everything you just said, Beth?
For anyone who missed it, rewind and turn up the volume. No, all jokes aside.
No, what I was going to say is we have the same thing happening in the district, where we have lots and lots of committees doing important work in the committee itself, but there's a lot of overlap between this curriculum committee and this curriculum committee, comprised of some of the same people. Who is making decisions and when, and how is this group communicating with this group? And it gets fairly complex when you have, you know, our full curriculum leadership team is 30 people with all of our directors and everything else. So this is work that's going to, I mean, we were puzzling through this morning, talking about our next curriculum leadership team meeting, where I feel like in my gut that the first thing we have to do, and we started this on our retreat, is determine how we're working together and how we bring coherence in our structure, and then all the other pieces kind of fall in place. But if we don't have that structure, then we're just like dumping energy all over the place, and it's just kind of dissipating.
And I think as you bring that coherence, this committee becomes less relevant. Because whatever the cadence ends up being, or the structure, it eliminates the need for this.
Well, it could be needed too if that group's exploring
Decides.
something and then bringing it back here too for the, yeah.
okay, so we can see the note TBD on the Student Services Task Force. So we will vote on this tonight and just revisit that piece, because this is sort of a recent update that we understand Danielle is working to create a task force that will include representation from the school committee along with CPAC and others. So
She presented that last night to CPAC.
okay, great.
That's fine.
And so she or you will be presenting that to us at an upcoming meeting? Okay. So at that point, we will figure out who from this group is going to serve on that task force. So that will be important and great. And speaking to your point earlier about, integrating the work of student services, I think that's definitely something that will be really important for us to have representation. The operating, rather than, let's just kind of have the conversation about the operating protocol discussion, I guess, in the context of figuring out whether we're adding that to this document before we vote on this. So operating protocols, yes, how do we want to approach this piece? We left off that we definitely need a subset of us to kind of spend a little bit of time digging into the models and bring something that we could all respond to and jump off of. Should we call that a task force?
Yeah, it's time limited, right? So
It's time limited. Ideally, it would be people who are able to kind of bring something to our meeting, which is October 26th. Is that correct? It's not on the calendar yet. I think that's what we agreed to. Yes, the retreat meeting.
Yeah, it's 6 to 9 on the 26th.
Yeah. Okay, so okay, I need to. All right, everybody put that in your calendar if you don't have it yet. I am going to do that right now.
I can just invite you all.
Okay. Because I'm supposed to be at both soccer and taekwondo at that time, but I will be neither of those places.
I think you can do it.
I believe in you too.
October
6th. Peter's going to send
Thursday.
us, Dr. Burrows will send us a calendar invitation, so
All right,
we're good.
thanks.
It
So,
was 25th before, my friend.
so the goal, hopefully, we can get 2 volunteers who can find time to meet together between now and the 26th to be able to bring us something there that we can work with. So,
I volunteer for that. This was
okay.
a topic that I shared and raised, so I'm happy to.
Is that the 2 chapter that we presented about?
And Selena, you're volunteering too?
I am.
This was, Peter had shared a series of examples.
Oh,
It
yes.
actually comes up in the book, but there's also a series of examples that were far better than the things that I found, so.
Awesome.
And I believe I asked Charlene to share those links with you after the meeting, so remember that.
Any chance they could be placed in a subfolder? In our-
That would be great, because there's 2 people nodding of recognition, and the rest of us are looking around like, yeah, I don't know about that, but sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, so we have, Bev and Selena have volunteered. Is that Bao, Mark, and Anna, is that okay with you?
Yeah.
You can always join, too.
We could have up to 3 people.
Volunteering, I'm very impressed.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and,
Hold on one second. May I ask a question
Yes.
about the liaison to student advisory committee?
yeah,
That's me? Yes. And I'm very looking forward to work with the student representative, who I have never met and I have no idea who that is. Or do we even have a student representative yet?
so I think typically the way that has worked is it takes some time for the student government at the high school to conduct their elections and sort of get up and running.
The elections happen in the spring, so those, or whenever, they've already happened, spring or fall, but they've been.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
The class officers had their election, including the school committee rep. I don't remember the timing, but it's been done.
Oh.
I haven't met the student rep yet. I need to.
Well,
Since it's
since
obviously,
they've been elected, yes.
they've been elected, I didn't know that, so that's good.
Okay,
The
so
person's elected at the same time that I was elected.
wow. Then can
Yeah.
you follow up with Peter?
Yeah.
And the two of you together can maybe reach out to the student government advisors and understand?
I'm going to have Charlene set up a meeting.
What's going
with
on?
You and I and the
Okay,
student rep.
sounds good.
Perfect, great, thank you. Okay, any other of these that we need to look at? We did hear from Lisa Troy, who's our representative to the Climate Action Planning Committee, and are, hoping that at some point it will work out for her to be able to join one of these meetings and provide us with an update. And then we'll have the opportunity to kind of ask questions and learn about the work that committee is doing. So appreciate her service on that committee.
Absolutely. Just in looking back at our goals, right, we have kind of crafting a task force to help us with our governance goals and are creating one for the superintendent evaluation, which is part of the governance goals. Our second one is student academic achievement well-being. All of those, I think, are work we are doing as a whole school committee. And then some of the stuff around financial, physical space resources, we have some subcommittees or advisory committees on. The last one is the community engagement piece of do we need a subcommittee on kind of communication strategy, the clear, coherent messaging and process for proactive community engagement by school committee members? Like, do we want to make sure we're discussing that as a whole group? I mean, it's
you're right.
obviously something we're committing to. But.
As a subcommittee, or you mean like as
Well, I think that's my question is that something we are going to just discuss as a whole group within the context of these meetings, or that, we want to get a subset of us together to be crafting ideas and plans around how to meet that goal?
I feel like the subcommittee structure is probably the best, because then you literally can generate content that then we bring back to this committee. But Dr. Burrows, based on your experience with this, what have you seen work well?
I mean, I guess I'm wondering so I guess the first thought I have is what outcome are we looking for? Mm-hmm. So, is this subcommittee putting something together? Is this subcommittee doing thinking and then bringing back quarterly to the governance meetings, or to, I guess thinking through that before putting a subcommittee together is important. I think, in my experience, when there's an issue, oftentimes the first response is to form a committee to work on it, but then the thought isn't done around how does that subcommittee interact back to get to the outcome. Mm-hmm. So I guess I would kind of backwards design and just think about what is it work that everybody needs to carry, or is it something that's not a full subcommittee, but people can get together, like the task force kind of idea of getting together and generating some thinking and ideas to then bring back to the full committee to discuss and talk about, so you can still generate that small group thinking and then bring it back to the larger group without having a monthly meeting and a central office rep at every meeting and going through that kind of formality. Mm-hmm. So those are just things to think about.
It makes me think as to whether or not it's a staff role, and then they engage us where necessary. I think your point was, at least that's the way I'm interpreting it, is we want to support your efforts to communicate with the public so that people feel as though they're being brought along in this process and they're always aware of what's happening, especially as we're going into the budget cycle. With that said, A, is that what you were thinking when you said that? And B, I don't want it to be the dog wagging the tail. And in the private sector, there are some norms as to how this works, and it usually does not involve the board of the private sector company. But this is very different. This is very local, and people will ask us questions, and we talked about this in our retreat about having consistency among us in terms of what our responses are. But what's the format by which that happens? It's not, this is why I'm saying it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the school committee is talking about school committee communication, right? That's one thing. If the school committee is talking about district communication, that falls to the superintendent, I think,
Yeah.
in terms of working within the district to work with our communication coordinator, with our principals, with everyone. We are doing that, and I've done that, and continue to do that. So I guess it's just, a question of that comes back to the outcome of what's the outcome of the subcommittee.
You don't need ambassadors as school committee reps because you'll engage us. For example, you invited us to visit Pierce when you go.
Yep.
I'd be happy not to be on another subcommittee, but if we're saying that there's something bigger than that, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on like how we are going to work to achieve, right, the goals we've kind of laid out for ourselves. And like I totally agree that there's like separation here. I mean, your point's fair of like, we are the board and not the people doing the work. And so this gets into like, how do we stay at the balcony and not get into the weeds? At the same time, like we are political, as much as I hate to say that, like we're political members, right? Who like, I think right now don't, other than like informal ways in which we are engaging with people within our daily lives within Milton, right? Learning and hearing about these things, and we obviously have the public engagement process within these own committees of public comment, but are there other things we think we can do like y'all did last year regarding community events or like other ways? We were just talking about when we passed the goals of like how are we messaging our annual school committee goals.
Right, and I mean, I think we put this on our goals, recognizing that we have work to do as a school committee in this community engagement work, sort of in partnership with the district's communication strategy, but that there would be a communication strategy belonging to our group for the work that we are doing as individuals and as a group. So, I mean, to me, like a starting place. So first of all, I mean, thanks for bringing it up, for reminding us of this, and that because it's so easy to just like keep going with all these various moving parts. At a minimum, if we choose to, not form a task force or what have you, we can just decide that we are going to put this on our agenda, which we probably should do, and not actually engage in like a conversation about it right now. But we can put it on our agenda as a full school committee conversation, even at our next meeting. In the context of forming task forces, like I think the role of the task force that like you just are forming for the operating protocols, like a first step for a task force, it seems to me, is collecting best practices from other places, and there are school committees that do this work more and better than we do, that we could probably learn from what they do. I mean, that's a first step.
May I suggest that we actually take Dr. Burrow's suggestion of having, whether it's, two of us, that have a conversation around operationalizing really this goal, because it hasn't been operationalized, right? It's lofty, it's there, but what does that mean? And then bring it back for a deeper conversation at our next retreat, and then we can share at our following meeting, this is the plan for how we're going to meet that goal this particular year.
So that would
rather
be
than
our November 1st meeting.
Yeah, correct. Rather than setting a formal task force of sorts, I think it just requires some, brainstorming and sort of thinking about what we did last year, thinking about that, looking at the mapping. I think mapping also, and thinking about your plan for community engagement, thinking about what role we want to play in that, and then also what other touch points we want to have with community throughout the year. That would be it just feels less formal than a task force.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So, I guess given that particular topic isn't even actually on our agenda right now. You know, we can just follow up. I probably the right way to go about this will be, I'll follow up with everybody to say, let me know, actually, I'll just tell you this, let me know if you're interested in working on this, and then I can put together up 2 people who are interested. We'll go from there. I think that's makes sense. Okay, so are we ready to make a motion to approve these assignments, updates and changes with the addition that we made?
I make a motion to approve the revised subcommittees and advisory committees and task force.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor? Okay, great. So now we just hand it over to finance. Not really.
Well, I need you, yep. We need to approve vendor warrant number 10 dated September 14th, 2023 in the amount of $379,435.05. Making a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Can we take a vote? Thank you, it's unanimous.
Okay. School building committee.
Sure, so I will get us started, and then please, Member Lauren, feel free to add to it. So we met on September 12th, and much of it was to cover some of the business that we already shared at the last meeting, which is that the request for a project manager is out. And there are steps that are being taken to try to get to the selection of a project manager. Along those lines, we did have a conversation, which we talked about last time actually, in this, that we reported back to you, was that in conjunction with the request for services for the project manager, we're also looking at the architectural services that we'll need for the Guile Road project. And so that conversation, we had a good conversation around that. We did get an update on the land swap. There is work being done to draft a piece of legislation language that will get us to not necessarily, I guess it's not a full approval. I was trying to remember that, right? It's not a formal approval. It's but definitely put legislation language before the legislature around the land swap, so that we're working on that. And then we did spend quite a lot of time thinking about the timeline of all these moving pieces. There's a lot, and how do we make sure that we advance as much as possible in preparation not only for the town, whether it's the town meeting in December or definitely the spring town meeting. We got an update on the communication that we've had with MSBA. We won't know until December if we are approved. We did get some contact, which is a big difference from last year where we were not in conversation at all. But we don't know yet if we're going to be selected or not. The big, new piece of business here is that in order to select or walk through the process of selecting a project manager, we established a review committee of a subset of the building committee members. So we did that, and so we're ready. We're just going to be waiting for those proposals to come in so that we can review them. Anything else you would add, Member Lauren?
The only other thing we somewhat discussed was just funding and the limited funding that the SVC currently has around $275,000, and just, how that was allocated back in the May town meeting, and so just how to think through the spending of that before the next round of funding would be possible, which would likely be the May town meeting, and what are all the things to the point of the timeline that need to get done and therefore can get done based upon that amount of funding before May. Just given how much things cost. So just as a context, like, a $60 million school building project, architectural costs are around 10% of that. And then so for schematic design or like initial design things, that's about 12% of the overall cost. So you're talking, several hundred thousands of dollars, obviously a lot more than what we currently have allocated. And then owner project manager costs, all these things just are costly. So it's, how are we spending that money wisely? How are we thinking about the allocation of it to get us as far forward as possible for the next time where we need to potentially come back to the town at large to get further allocations within budget cycle or some larger debt question that the town would vote on.
Okay, thank you. How frequently is the school building committee meeting these days?
About every 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Every other week or so? Okay. Well, thank you both very much. So that brings us to Anna, policy.
So we had our policy meeting last Thursday, September 14th. We had Lizzie, Val, Peter, and myself in attendance, and this was kind of an initial meeting to bring Peter up to speed on kind of the work we've been doing on that committee. We had a good initial discussion about the school year calendar and our calendar policy, which was updated a few years back, so which was great for us to kind of review and look at. And we'll be discussing that at our October meeting further. We also looked at our communication policy, which we had originally planned to bring to the school committee for a first reading, but then Peter suggested maybe we look at, maybe that this might be more of a procedure versus a policy, that we should, so what he suggested is that we kind of look at all our policies, existing policies, and kind of streamline the ones that we have and just kind of get rid of the ones that are kind of outdated or we don't really need anymore, including like our meal charge policy, because that doesn't really apply anymore since the cost is covered now. So yeah, that was a pretty efficient first meeting. I'll have more to share at the next one.
And we are, just to go along with that, we are working on, because some of the policies we hold are not recommended or even held by MASC anymore in their policy guide manual. So we're creating a chart right now that shows the MASC required policies and recommended policies, what we currently hold. There was a recent newsletter that went out that the MASC recommended removing about 10 or 15 policies. In addition, I think there's also backdated policies we have that probably were added in the past and maybe just kind of like kept in the hopper without review or without going back to see if MASC had taken any action on them. So that's I think, a really helpful place to start to take a look at kind of what do we need to clean up, how do we make this kind of up to date in 2023.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions? Okay, so approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. August 23rd and September 6th. So looking at the August 23rd, we'll take these separately since actually one correction on the August 23rd minutes are that Selena and Beverly were not present at that meeting. So I've made that change at the top, so we'll vote the minutes separately. Does anyone have any other changes to the August 23rd? All right, then I'll make a motion to approve the Milton School Committee minutes of August 23rd. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, okay, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Okay. So we have 2 members abstaining who were not there.
They were in better places.
They were.
Oh, this was the most important place I could be. I apologize for not being in attendance.
No. We don't recharge, we can't function to serve the town. So that was important. All right, so that brings us to the second set, which is November, oh my gosh, sorry. September 6th, 2023. Any changes to these months?
Yes, down where the school building committee report is at, it says agricultural services rather than architectural.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Anything else? All right, then I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of September 6th, 2023. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, thank you. All in favor? All right. So last is just talking about our next meeting agenda items. So I know that we have a number of things on our calendar, and maybe we just confirm what those might be and then see if there are additional items. So is the Cunningham Site Council planning to present? Okay. The DESI.
I am working with all the principals on a template for the presentations, and
Great.
we've set a time limit of 30 minutes with presentation and questions.
All right. Thank you. But it will be great to see them. So we have the DESI end of year report. Is that the same as the 2022-2023 annual report?
I don't think so, no.
That's coming from finance? Okay.
The DESI end of year report is the final report on expenditures for last year that's required by DESI. It's a lovely 100-page spreadsheet that just requires a vote of the school committee to submit. It actually has to be submitted by September 30th, so I actually have the signature page for you for tonight. It is done. We're waiting for one piece of information from Town Hall. All the school side pieces are done. So we'll have it. I don't know if you really want it printed out for you, but it's online at DESI once we submit it. The other report is what goes in the town annual report in the spring. So it's a report on the school from last year. That's just a document explaining all the good things that happened last year.
Okay. So along with that, are we adding back the fourth quarter report?
We haven't settled on a date
Yeah, that's
for that
gonna come
meeting,
after, yeah.
but as soon as that is done, I asked
Okay.
both member Loring and Miranda whether or not we can meet early October. We didn't actually pick which date in early October.
Okay. The spring 2023 data presentation, that So we all, MPS curriculum review number 1, is that the same thing?
I just took it off the
Okay,
school committee meeting calendar revised that a number of people are on right now.
yeah.
Yeah, I took it off the bottom
Oh,
there
I see.
because it's going to be subsumed within the curriculum review.
Sounds good. Okay, that's, all right, and then is that, sorry, we had like fiscal end of year report. We just have several annual reports listed on this calendar. I'm just trying to make sure I understand, are these separate, or are you giving us
I think the annual report.
Fiscal year
the
report.
DESI? We know what the DESI is, the annual report is for the town.
For the town report.
The fiscal end of year report is just the
The
school
fourth
district.
quarter.
That's the
That's
fourth
the fourth
quarter.
quarter report that's going to be going to.
Yeah,
Got it.
So I think it's that third column where it says annual report again, that's the duplicate.
that's
So
what I was thinking.
so we remove that annual report. Perfect. All right. Any other agenda items, subcommittees, advisory committee meetings coming up?
We could do a facility advisory. committee
Facilities?
report.
Okay,
School building will have met again.
okay. All right, policy will not have met again yet.
Curriculum instruction would not have met
Okay. All
by
right,
the 4th.
by the, yeah, we're talking about
That's 2 weeks.
October 4th.
Yep.
Okay. And then, so I see you added the communities, oh, that's for the following week, never mind.
I didn't want to add anything big for this because we've got with the
The
coming
data
up
rep-
site council and then the curriculum review is going to be.
That's a lot,
That's
yeah.
a lot. That's,
Those are too long.
I don't want to add anything other substantial things to it.
Makes sense.
May I add one more thing to the agenda is tomorrow, a few of us are visiting schools, right? Could we have a little summary of like how things go?
Can that come under facilities?
Yeah, that was what I would think. So,
Oh, awesome.
Great.
Okay. Perfect. I'm not gonna do it right now, but I think in future, I'm just gonna add a column maybe here where we're tracking like which sub and advisory committees are reporting out
Yeah, it was,
at given meetings, because it's a little awkward to like move between different.
it would also be nice to have a potential topic. As opposed, like once something goes on here, then you think, was it added, was it not added? So it would be nice to put like a column for.
Yeah, during your update. That's
Yeah.
good.
Maybe you can just change the third column for location and format.
Yeah.
Since we already know what location and format will be
That's
forever.
true.
As of now.
Good point.
Okay. Let's see. All right. I'll try to, this is a work in progress. We're just keeping on
A lot of things.
refining as we go. All right. But I think that sounds like that's it. Of course, if anything else comes up, just let me and Charlene know so that we can make sure it gets added. And with that, just motion to adjourn. Anybody?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Right.